Hey everybody, what up? All right, sorry, it's been a while, but anyway, this video, what I'm talking about is this new Vision Pro from Apple, and I gotta be honest, man, I was pretty excited for Apple to jump into this market, and I guess I still am because when we talk about the future and a lot of hyped up technology, I feel like VR is something that is somewhat overlooked. I mean, I know that there is like an industry; it's projected to grow by quite a bit over the next 5 years. And it's good to see that we keep making improvements in VR technology. So it seems like it all started with Palmer Luckey and starting Oculus. Like, that's a pretty fascinating story. The kid's 17 years old, starts the first prototype in his parents' garage, and then sells his company for 4 years later for $2 billion. So I feel like he's one of the largest success stories when we talk about, like, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates types. He pretty much brought an entire industry to the mainstream. And I know that there's probably arguments about whether or not, maybe he was truly behind all that technology. It was a lot of work in progress. It was many decades of working on that technology. In fact, I'm not sure if you guys know, but like Oculus was actually sued by another company. I think it was called ZeniMax in Maryland, and they ended up getting a $500 million judgment for against Oculus and Palmer Luckey for what they say, I guess, were just trademark infringements and just not really giving credit, I suppose. But anyway, long story on that. But and I don't really know all of the details on that. But obviously, not one single person came up with all this technology. Some of that, that's just not possible. But you don't have to be the one to come up with it to actually make something mainstream. Like, you look at Steve Jobs and the iPhone and all that. Point being, though, is I've been excited for VR for, I would say, many years, and I've been, the same as other types. I think adults that have jobs and kids and responsibilities and stuff, and it's very difficult to strap a headset onto your face and completely immerse yourself into the VR world. And then I've also, it's been clunky, right? I had the initial VR for the PlayStation. I thought that was cool. It's very cool to see that type of experience, but I've experienced some of the motion sickness for games that were not created very well. I'm not a big fan of like the turn and look or the teleportation features that you have in a lot of video games. So navigation and controls is something that we're continuing to try to get right when it comes to VR and especially gaming. So all that said, I've been waiting for Apple to come into the market, because when Apple comes into the market, they create products like the iPhone or the iWatch, and this is really their first product in nearly 10 years. And it has the ability to make this a mainstream technology. Now, my interest in VR is mostly about video gaming. I don't really need to watch videos on Netflix in a 3D space. I don't really understand that unless the whole movie is like 3D around me. Like, I don't really see the point. But Apple went ahead and they released this new product, right? And number one, I don't like how they use the strap here. So the strap is actually plugged into the battery pack, and you don't have to have this strap. So you're going to be able to like disconnect this strap. But one of the great things about, I think, the Oculus is that instead of the Oculus Rift, which has all these cables and stuff that attach to your head, or the Valve Index that has like different sensors that you have to set up around the room, which probably is still the best VR headset out there right now, which is the Valve Index. The Oculus, though, allows you, even with some scaled back hardware, you can still play your games and you don't have to deal with all the clunky wiring. So really, I think of all these products, probably Oculus Quest is still my personal favorite just for video gaming, just because it's very easy to work with. Although I know it's not the best when it comes to specs and hardware. So Apple, though, first thing looking at this, I'm like, it looks kind of weird. The eyes right here are like projected, and that's that's kind of strange. I mean, it's so, I guess you're not so immersed in the world, because you can't actually, from what I understand, see through that screen, but it's like projecting your eyes through it. I could be wrong on that, but anyway, it's a little weird. Having the strap there is, I think, a detriment to selling the product to the mainstream, because again, even the Oculus, you don't have to have the strap on. And then the reason why they probably have the strap on is because this Apple product has a battery life of about 2 hours. So like, that's less than a lot of movies. So when you look at this, it looks weird. It looks like it's not going to gain mainstream adoption, but if any company can do it, it's probably going to be Apple. And when you look at something like this and navigating your content, like your typical user behavior, which is like what? Looking at photos, doing a bunch of stupid selfies, watching videos, like, I mean, TikToks and all that. Like, so if that is what most people are using these devices for, then there's probably still going to be a market for people that want to do that sort of scaled back content. The biggest downside, or the biggest really surprise to me, and just, you know, the thing that I don't like is that this VR headset, it has great specs, 4K in each eye, but it's not geared towards gaming at all. In fact, there's no handheld control. So they're using the motion controls, but you can't really do that in video gaming. So I think the biggest letdown for this product so far for me, besides the price, is the fact that it's not actually built for gaming. So I was hoping that Apple getting into the space would actually amplify and increase VR gaming, which has a long way to go. And I do think there's a huge future in it. So when we talk about Chat GPT, I know everybody's hyped up on these chatbots, you know, but I think that there's a future for these chatbots, and I think that, you know, they are getting better, and we're going to use them throughout our work life, you know, quite a bit. I think VR has still got a ways to go, but we're also going to eventually have this be the mainstream. But the biggest downside is the wiring, the price, the immersion in the world, and closing yourself off to the outside world. Like, look at this person watching TV like by themselves. How are multiple people going to watch this if you have to pay $3,500 for every headset? I mean, it's just simply not going to happen. This is going to be for like tech nerds and enthusiasts and rich people out of the gate, and probably some major Apple fan people. But so we haven't solved that problem of like, this thing needs to be less clunky. It doesn't matter if it weighs a pound. If it's sitting on your head, like even wearing a hat that's a few ounces, like, gets tiring and messes up your hair after a while, and like rubs against your ears. Like, there's things like people don't want to wear these headsets, especially at work. And I think Zuckerberg with Meta has found out, you know, a hard way that, yeah, people aren't inclined to just change their workplace and put on a clunky VR headset just so they can have an avatar in a Zoom meeting or something. It doesn't make too much sense to me. So it is smaller, I think, than some of these other clunkier headsets, but it's still got a ways to go, in my opinion. So if this is what we have right now, we're looking at probably another 5 to 10 years, I think, before this truly becomes mainstream. But I do think that what you see here is how the future is going to be in one way, shape, or form. Eventually, these things are going to be the size of like Google Glass, but it's actually going to work, and it's going to allow an AR, VR experience around you. How that happens, who knows? The technology's got to come a long way for that to be possible. But I think until that happens, we're never really going to have mainstream adoption. But if you're a VR enthusiast, if you like VR gaming, if you're into actually developing VR games, which is what my new passion is lately, this is going to be good news for the industry, because a lot of that VR technology and if you're building games with it, like, that can be applied also to this type of product for your typical workflow type thing, you know, looking at Excel documents or browsing the web. So those skill sets, I think, are going to be paying dividends in the future, regardless of the fact that Apple hasn't gotten into the market specifically for gaming at this point. And then another good thing on that front is that one of the most frustrating things, I think, when it comes to VR is, like, do you use Unity or Unreal? And you know, you have Steam VR, and like Steam VR works well for tracking on Unity, like out of the box when it comes to the Valve Index, but it struggles with like something like Unreal Engine. So that all being said, we have this new standard, which is like if you've ever seen WebGL, which brought the OpenGL graphics library to the web, and we call it WebGL, and now we have WebGPU, which is making headwinds. But the OpenXR is from this Kronos group that is responsible for WebGL, which is like basically solidifying how developers are going to develop virtual reality and augmented reality. This has a ways to go. OpenXR, like right now, I think struggles with Unity, especially with the Valve Index, just from personal experience. But it does work well, in my opinion, on Unreal Engine, which is where I'm focusing my time. Like I much prefer Unreal Engine these days versus Unity. And I use OpenXR. So basically, this is going to be, I think, good news for the VR system. We're solidifying the technology, the software, the SDKs, like the way of doing things. We're solidifying, actual controls, and the hardware and specs are getting much better with these headsets. And then the actual bulkiness, like with the lack of wiring, the weight of the system itself, that is all getting better as well. So the point being, I think, when we want to talk about hyping things up, I think VR, AR is definitely worthy of the hype. And it's got a long way to go. Mark Zuckerberg's not a complete idiot. In fact, he's not an idiot at all. He was trying to be a forward thinker and be like, okay, I'm going to change Facebook to Meta, and I'm going to invest $16 billion in research and development. And they're making some leaps forward in that field, especially with the Quest. And I think with the Quest being so much cheaper than this Apple product, they're still going to have a market there for quite some time. But the point being is, like, even forward thinkers like that, one of the richest people in the world, they are investing a lot of time and attention in AR, VR. So it's difficult to see, like, early on. I mean, you can compare this to, like, when iPhone came out and the BlackBerry was still popular, and people are like, why would I want to, like, swipe on a screen or, click on a glass phone or, browse the internet on my phone? Like, there was that argument for the longest time. In fact, I remember, like, there was a lot of developers in the space when mobile development was first taking off after the smartphones, and you still had a majority of your, like, search traffic on Google from desktop computers. And then that slowly started to dwindle down, and eventually, like, mobile took over. And these days, like, you're much more likely to get traffic on your website from a mobile device than you are from a desktop device. So there were many people back in those days that couldn't see the future, and that's just the way things are. And you're gonna have hype, and sometimes you're gonna have it lives up to potential, and sometimes it doesn't. But there's always going to be people that will doubt what the future is going to be, including people like myself who have always doubted cryptocurrency. And really, I've always said, kind of pump the brakes on these chatbots. And I'm still sort of on the record of saying pump the brakes on the chatbots a little bit. That, like, we're seeing more stories come out now where ChatGPT isn't exactly doing what people have sort of hyped it up to say that it can do. Although it can do a lot and it will get better. There's quite a ways to go on that. And so if you ask me, though, on the record, is ChatGPT overhyped? I think it's slightly overhyped, but there's definitely going to be a future in it, and we're just going to have to embrace those things. So we should all be probably using GitHub Copilot at this point. We should all be using the chat bots when they make sense, and hopefully, like, companies like OpenAI does not, like, keep nerfing their product, because they definitely are scaling it back, it would seem. So, like, my latest usages of ChatGPT 4 are not as good as what they were even when they announced it just a few months ago. So yeah, when we talk about hype in the future, I do think AR, XR, OpenXR, and VR is definitely going to be in the future, probably for all of us. If you guys are learning the code, check out my website, CodeHawk. I haven't done anything with this in quite some time, and honestly, I keep saying that I will, but I don't know like there's so much stuff. Like it's like a personal project, but I'm like, man, I hate these thumbnails. What was I thinking? I just went through and I was like, I need to have all the same thumbnails. My thumbnails were so much better before, and now they're awful. But anyway, there's a bunch of courses there on my website, and the focus of it, though, as far as like my teaching and tutorials, I'm switching things up from web development, which I do day in and day out, and eventually I'll probably do some cloud stuff, like AWS specifically. But my focus is going to actually be on virtual reality, video game development, mostly in Unreal Engine, and then just 3D modeling and animation. So that's sort of where I've been on a personal level lately, especially this year. So I'm making a lot of progress in regards to like what I'm learning. Look, this thumbnail doesn't even match. This website, again, you come out there with a website or personal project, people are like, well, this should be better. And that it's like, nah, dude, this is me not putting all my stuff out on YouTube to basically get stolen, which is what's happened before. And just simply, cut out the middleman and just be like, hey, you're interested in learning from me? Go ahead and check out my own website. That's what this is about. It's a personal project. It's not about some professional type thing. If it ever someday turned into that, that would be a different story. But you'll see when you actually build your own personal projects, like most of them don't ever actually get finished. And then when they do get finished, like they're never sort of what you expect them to be, because like software is never done. But if you ever are interested in building your own personal project, though, check out my website. All right, guys, have a good day. Take care.